Hello and welcome back to another card making video. Today we will be creating a slimline card using contents from the Simon Says Stamp 2024 February card kit called Love Story. Before we get started, if you could please take a moment to like and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And to all my existing subscribers, thank you so much for your continued support. This kit is jam-packed with goodies, and I would encourage you to pause this video and watch my unboxing of the February kit to see what is included. So let's get started. My first panel I have cut to 3 5/16 by 8 5/16. Honestly, to make math a little bit easier, you should probably just cut it 3 1/4 by 8 1/4, and that would work just fine. I will be using the typewriter from the slider camera and typewriter stamp set. And I will be stamping the typewriter 3 times on my panel using my Distress Oxide inks and my Misti stamping tool. So at this point, you can decide how you want to arrange your typewriter. You can either skew them slightly, line them up perfectly, or whatever you think is best. So I'm going to take my panel and I am going to make sure that it is tucked in the right hand corner of my Misti. That way I can take my typewriter and a small sliver of the typewriter will be hanging over the panel. It is quite large, so in order to get all 3 stamped perfectly, I do need to hang a little bit off the edge. I went ahead and picked out 6 different colors that I will be using to stamp our typewriter. Starting with the color Victorian Velvet, I'm only going to stamp half of the typewriter, and I'm going to stamp the upper half of the typewriter using the Victorian Velvet. Now, if I was using dye inks, I would use my blending brush to pounce along the transition line to make sure I have a smooth transition between the 2 colors. However, I wasn't getting the same effect that I wanted using my oxides, and that's because they are a pigment and dye ink fusion ink pad. So I actually kind of had to do like a swiping, almost like a little feathering before I pounced. I would say using a pouncer would probably have been best to do this technique, but at the time I didn't have pouncers for my oxides. I only have them for my dye inks, and you don't want to use one pouncer for dye inks and your oxides. You want to have 2 different pouncers. So I kind of just made my blending brush work, and now that I have the upper portion of the stamp completed, I'm going to switch to Seedless Preserves, and I'm going to stamp the bottom half of the typewriter. Another reason I'm not too worried about having the best transition line is I don't want this to be perfect. I'm not trying to get the perfect stamped image. If I was going to try to get the perfect stamped image, I'd probably use my dye inks. Because the oxide inks are a little bit more thick, I would say, in consistency, I do lose some of those detailed images, but I'm okay with that because I'm trying to go for more of a vintage look. So I don't want my typewriters to be exactly perfect. And here I was looking at my stamped image and I thought, well, maybe I should come back in with my Victorian Velvet to restamp the upper portion of the image. And in hindsight, I wish I didn't. And the only reason why I wish I didn't is because it actually oxidized a little too much and it really blurred out some of that image from my stamp. But again, it's okay because I'm not trying to get the perfect stamped image, and I'm also going to come in after I'm done stamping the Victorian Velvet with my Gina K Designs black amalgam ink to get kind of that grungy look, so to speak. And so here I am again coming back in with the Victorian Velvet so that way I can stamp a second time. But that's the only time I'm going to be stamping twice. One other step that I will say in this project that some may or may not like is normally I don't clean off my stamps when I am crafting, but for this project, you are going to need to clean between stampings. And that is because, well, one, you have your oxides, and then I'm coming in after I stamp my oxide, and I'm going to use an amalgam ink to stamp on top of that. Now that oxide ink will resist the amalgam ink. And because I'm using one stamped image for all three of my images on my panel, I have to clean them off in between stamping. So that's the only, I would say, downfall of this project is you do have to clean in between in order to get the best results. So for some people that might not be something they want to do, but you know, I think it still turned out great. And if you're not doing it all the time, I think that you should give it a try. So again, you will see that that amalgam ink is resisted. Well, the oxide resists the amalgam ink. So I'm going to take my tidy towel and I'm going to wipe off that oxide ink using a microfiber cloth, because the tidy towel, it does have some water on it, to make sure that it's nice and dry. And then I'm going to come in with my amalgam ink and I'm going to stamp one more time. Again, I do not want the black ink to be stamped perfect because it's going to hide too much of the typewriter. So my goal here is just to get a little bit of the black ink to make it more of a grungy look, so to speak. So here I am going in again and stamping twice, and I like the way that it looks. Not too much black, it's not overpowering. Oh, I guess I stamped it a third time. This one typewriter for some reason really gave me a hard time. I did create this card off screen and I did not have to stamp this many times, and to be honest, even on this card, this is the only typewriter that actually gave me some trouble. So you don't have to stamp this many times. With the amalgam ink, you only have to stamp twice, and then for your oxide stamping, you only have to do it once. So now that I'm done stamping with the amalgam ink, this is where the cleaning comes in, because even though it looks like the amalgam ink is not going to come off on your panel, it really is. And again, it's because that oxide ink is resisting the amalgam ink, but there's still a lot of ink on this ink pad. So I'm using my Hero Art scrubber block and some Gina K Design stamp cleaner, and I'm going to go ahead and clean my stamp, and just in a circular motion, just kind of rubbing against the entire stamp to make sure all of the amalgam ink is off of the stamp. And then I'm going to use my tidy towel, because that stamp cleaner has a little bit of an oil base to it. I want to take my tidy towel, run it along there to make sure it's completely wiped off, and then to dry my stamp, I'm using a microfiber cloth. Now I know I can take this stamp off of my Misti and reposition it next to my first stamped image, and that's not going to leave a mark on my white cardstock. So I'm going to align the second typewriter, and I'm going to actually skew it just a little bit because I don't want them to be in a complete straight line, but I do need to make it close to the first typewriter so I can fit the third typewriter. And I'm going to close the door of my Misti to pick up that stamp. Again, still making sure that my panel is in the lower right-hand corner. And I will be using worn lipstick to stamp the upper half of this typewriter. I'll bring in my blending brush and I'm going to try to smooth out that stamped line. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. I just don't want a really harsh line there. Making sure my panel is still tucked in the lower right-hand corner. And I think that looks great. Again, I don't want to restamp that. I don't want to stamp it twice because, again, I feel like if you do, it's too much oxide ink and then it'll oxidize and kind of wash it out. So I learned my lesson on the first typewriter. Wiping it off with my tidy towel, drying it off with my microfiber cloth, and then stamp the lower half using Lumberjack plaid. And then I'll repeat the same process with my blending brush. So once I've stamped the lower half of the typewriter, I'll take my tidy towel again and wipe off the remaining ink off of my stamp. That looks so good. I like those two colors together. Once again, using my tidy towel from Gina K Designs to wipe off my stamp, and then I'm going to dry it using a microfiber cloth. I will stamp with my Gina K Designs Amalgam ink in the color Obsidian. And all the products that I use will be listed in the description box below. If you have a question or if I forget anything, please leave me a comment and I will make sure to add whatever is missing and or answer your questions. This looks really good. So I'm going to take again my Hero Arts scrubbing block and I'm going to clean off the amalgam ink. The scrubbing blocks are nice because they are, the pad is Velcro, so they do carry replacement pads that you can switch them out, but you could also wash them too. So don't think that it's dirty, I gotta throw it away. No, just run them under water. Sometimes if it's stubborn, I'll use baby soap, baby shampoo to clean it off with some warm water, and they're good as new. So for my third typewriter, I'm actually going to shift my panel over to the lower left-hand corner because again, the typewriters on the end of the panels do hang over just slightly to make sure that they all fit. And I'm going to position the last typewriter and stamp my final two colors. For my third and final typewriter, I am going to stamp the upper half of the typewriter using Dusty Concord. I'll also list the colors that I used on my first card too, in case you like that color combination, because I do have a teal colored typewriter, so I'll list that in the description box below as well. Then I'll use my blending brush to smooth out that line. And then I'll stamp my image. The final Oxide color I will be using to pair with the Dusty Concord is Villainous Potion. This is a really deep, pretty purple. It does have kind of a funny smell to it compared to all the other Oxide colors that I have, but I love the color of the purple. And I don't know what I'm doing with that pinky finger, but apparently it's definitely helping with some stability. I noticed that through the video. I really had that pinky out there. Pinky's out, huh? Oh, sometimes I just have to make fun of myself. That's hilarious. Again, making sure that everything is positioned in the lower left-hand corner, I will stamp my third and final image. They look so good. I like adding that a little bit of black to them as well. They definitely feel vintage to me. I will say normally I don't use my Oxide inks to stamp. Most of the time I'm just using them to ink blend a background. They're not my favorite to use for stamping, but you can use them for stamped images. I just like them because you can create beautiful blended backgrounds, and for people who struggle with blending, because they are a dye and pigment fused ink, it makes ink blending a lot easier. So if you're a beginner with ink blending, I would definitely start with a few Oxide colors to really get the hang and get some practice, because they're a lot more forgiving than trying to ink blend dye inks. So I will stamp the Obsidian black ink on top of my final typewriter. Here I wanted to show you that normally I spray my stamp cleaner on the block first and then clean my stamp, but you could also just use the stamp cleaner and directly spray it on the stamp and then use your stamp scrubbing block or paper towel, whatever you use. You could do it either way. So I just wanted to show you that you can either spray your scrubbing block or spray the stamp first. It doesn't really matter. And then use my tidy towel to kind of clean up or wipe away any excess stamp cleaner. And then I'll use my microfiber cloth to dry everything off. So now I'm going to stamp my background, my text background, and to do this I will need to remove the pad of my Misti because this is a red rubber cling stamp. And I'm going to move my panel up just a hair. It looks like I move it up right around the 4-inch line. And I will tape it down using some low tack tape because I want to make sure that this does not shift when I stamp my background. I will be using the Simon Says Stamp Friendship Text background. And then I will be using the color Soft Stone by Gina K Designs. And that is a dye ink that I will be using to stamp my image. When adding your ink to your stamp image, you don't need to cover the entire surface area. As you can tell, your panel is a lot smaller than the stamp itself, but at the time I just covered the entire stamp. I don't know why. I didn't need to, but if it makes it easier for you to do that way, go ahead, because you could just use your tidy towel to wipe off any of the remaining ink that is outside of your panel. Because the background stamp, I believe, is 6x6 and our panel is longer than 6x6, I'm going to remove the low tack tape and I'm going to shift the panel to the other side of the Misti, and then I will once again bring in my low tack tape to tape it down. Do keep in mind where you have originally lined up your panel because you want to make sure that it lines up, the background text lines up with lines up on both sides of your front panel. So again, I had it lined up pretty much at the 4-inch mark, so I'm going to make sure that it's lined up at the 4-inch mark when I shift it over. And I'm going to bring in the carrier sheet to basically mask off where I first stamped, and then I'll tape that down with low tack tape. Once everything has been taped down, I will remove my stamp and I will reposition the stamp to the other side of the panel, ink it up with still the soft stone ink, and repeat the same process. Now there were some areas like along the carrier sheet and along the outer edge, you do have to kind of really put some pressure down because there's a little bit of a dimension gap there that you just really need to make sure you're making contact with when stamping down. So that's why you see that I do press down a little bit firmer in those areas. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to ink blending our edges to get our vintage look. I'm bringing in my Waffle Flower stencil mat, which is a silicone based mat. The pink, it is a white mat, but because I've used reds or pinks, it did stain the mat, but that's okay because the mat still works great. Just want to let you know that the inks can stain your mat. But before I get to ink blending, I'm going to take the 2 heart stamps. Oh, no, I'm going to actually stamp my text first. And I will be using my Gina K Designs Black Onyx dye ink, and I'm going to use an acrylic block to freehand stamp my text. Again, all of my stamps that I'm using have already been conditioned. Just make sure you condition your stamps so that way you can get the best impression, especially since I'm not using a Misti to condition your stamps. All you need to do is just run your finger over the stamp until they turn cloudy. Please don't use anything else. That is the best way to condition them. And then I'm going to stamp the I love you twice. And for the 3rd typewriter, I'm going to take the I miss you, that is all stamp from the same stamp. And I'm only going to ink up the bottom portion of this stamp, the one that says that is all, period. And that's going to complete my text. So you could use post-it note tape or masking magic to mask off the I miss you portion of the stamp. Some people do cut their stamps, but I felt like this text was too tight to cut between them. So I'm just being very careful to just ink up the areas that I want to stamp down with. And using a ink cube made that really easy. So again, inked up the bottom portion of the stamp. I'm going to stamp that down. And so then my panel will just say, I love you, that is all. And here I'm going to switch to the 2 hearts in this stamp set. I'm going to place them on my acrylic block, and I'm going to use the Gina K Designs colors Red Hot and Medium Carnation. The hearts are 2 different sizes, so I'm going to use Red Hot for the larger heart, and I'll use the Medium Carnation for the smaller heart. And again, not using a Misti, just using my acrylic block. I'm going to ink up the hearts, and I'm going to just scatter the hearts all over my background. Using a blending brush, I will ink up the edges of my card in the color Sandy Beach. After I have applied the Sandy Beach, I will switch to a darker color, Using the same blending brush because it's still the same color family, I'm going to switch to the color Warm Cocoa. And when I blend the Warm Cocoa onto the panel, I'm literally just kissing the edge of the cardstock. I don't want to bring in the Warm Cocoa as high as I did with the Sandy Beach. Off screen, I did cut my layering panel to 3 7/16 by 8 7/16 out of Gina K Design's dark chocolate cardstock. I will glue both panels together using my Gina K Designs Connect liquid adhesive. Off screen, I used my Simon Says stamp Simple Valentine's Day die set and cut out the words Happy Valentine's Day. The die set does come with a shadow die, and I will not be using that on today's card project, but it is a 2 die set, the words and the shadow, and I've cut my words out of the Tim Holtz Ideology metallic cardstock. I would describe the color to be more of a brass than it is gold. And I'm going to adhere everything onto a card base that measures 4 by 9. I want to add dimension to my Happy Valentine's Day, so I'm going to use the same die and cut out the words 2 additional times using white cardstock, and I will glue them together, stack them together to create that dimension. I will bring in my T-square ruler to make sure my sentiment is nice and straight. And I'll bring out my heart embellishments from Gina K Designs. I'm going to pull out 3 white hearts and I will apply them around my sentiment. I like odd numbers, so I only pulled out 3, but you can definitely add more if you would like. It all depends on your personal preference. Before I adhere them down, I will glue my panel to my card base. Again, that measures 4 by 9. Using my Connect glue. That also gives me wiggle room to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. I like to use either reverse tweezers or my Studio Katia embellishment one to help me place my embellishments on my cards. If you haven't already watched my unboxing video of this February card kit, I definitely would. At the end of that video, I do have a coupon from Simon Says Stamp that I wanted to share with you guys. That's good on their website. So again, I would head on over there, watch the video, get that coupon to go shopping, and that'll complete today's card project. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through this long video. I do hope to see you in the next video, and until next time, bye!